Okay, so hello and welcome back to another Unity multiplayer tutorial. In today's video, we're going to be getting set up with the latest version of Unity along with the latest version of netcode for game objects. We'll then create some basic functionality in the project, and I'll give you access to the GitHub repository for it, and we can use this as a template in any of the future tutorials. I hope you're looking forward to it, so let's get started. So in the description down below, there'll be a link to the Unity netcode for game objects documentation in case you need to go on here and you want to read about how any of the stuff works. And there'll also be a link to my repository on GitHub, which will have this project in the states at the end of the video. And that way you can download this if you want to just follow along from there. And like I said in the intro, any future tutorials, any projects we make are going to start with this, just so we don't have to set everything up every single time. And with that said, we can now head into Unity, and I've already got some stuff set up here. I'll go through it with you in a minute, but it's mainly just UI, the kind of stuff I don't want to waste time making in the video itself. So the first thing to note is I'm using Unity version 22.20F1. You can use any later version than this, and as soon as new official versions come out, I'll be using them. But currently 2023.1 I think is still in alpha, so I'm not going to bother touching that just yet. But this is the version I'm using. And if we go to our window package manager, you can see in here what packages I'm using. So the ones with the link icon are dependencies, so I've not manually installed those, they are required. The ones I have installed, I've installed input system for when we use input in our future tutorials, and netcode for game objects, currently version 1.1.0. And then when I created this project using the template, the URP template, it installed the universal render pipeline, and nowadays it installs TextMesh Pro by default, and same with these code editor add-ons. So you can see here everything that I've got. And then to make testing easy, if you go over to Edit, Project Settings, I've selected Windowed, and I've put in a smaller resolution here so that when we build and run, we can run multiple instances and have these small windows so we can test multiple clients. So now we can have a look through what I've set up already. So if we go back, we've got two scenes. We have this main menu scene and a gameplay scene, where currently the gameplay scene just has a camera, a light source, some post-processing, and the UI event system. This technically doesn't need to be in here right now because we don't have any UI, but I'm sure we will in our game, whatever it is we decide to make. And then if we go back to the main menu, we have the camera again. We don't have the sun and we don't have the post-processing, but then we do have a main menu object, and this main menu object just has a canvas. The canvas has the background image, which is just this gray color in the background. It's got the title, and it's got 3 buttons. So we've got a host, a server, and a client button. So we can use any of these 3 when testing. We'll probably mainly just hit host and then client on all the others, but it might be nice to see what a dedicated server might be like if we run as a server and then just connect clients to that. And right now these buttons aren't actually hooked up to anything because we need to write a little bit of code for that. And then outside of here, we have the event system again, and we have the network manager. So this is a script given to us by Unity themselves in the netcode for game objects package. And as for the settings on here, I've left it all as the default except for the player prefab. And that's simply the prefab that's spawned in when a client connects. So if you want to look at the player prefab, we'll go into the scene view for the player prefab. It's just a capsule. And on the capsule, I've added a network object component that also comes with netcode for game objects. And that's just a way of syncing an object over the network. So if you have anything that you want to spawn in on the server and then have all the clients see that, or if you want an object to move and have all the other clients have it move too, you need a network object on your game object. And then for testing purposes, I've also added a network transform component that comes built in. And I've selected to sync the position and the rotation of the object, but not the scale. So if we run the game, have all our players spawn in, and we decide to change the scale of an object at runtime, the other clients won't see that, which is fine because most games don't change the scale of characters. And if you did, then you could enable these. But for now, we'll leave it just like this with the position and the rotation. So once you have your player prefab, just make sure in the network manager it is assigned as the player prefab, and then it will handle automatically spawning it in when we connect. So that's it for all the setup, and all we need to do now is write some code to hook these buttons up to so that we can actually start hosting, start a server, or join as a client. So if we go over to the main menu, I have this main menu display script, which is currently empty, but let's open that up in VS Code. You'll see here it's empty. So when you download the project from GitHub, this will already be filled in, but for the sake of the tutorial, it'd be nice to actually write some code. So if you're following along, you can just make a new script, stick it on your UI, and then we can code it here together. So in the UI, we have 3 buttons that we need to hook up. So we can make 3 public methods. They need to be public so the buttons can hook into them, and they don't need to return anything. So we'll make public void start host, and then we'll also do public void start server, as well as public void start client. Like so. Let's zoom in a little bit, hide the side panel. So all we need to do here is call a method on the network manager, that big script we looked at earlier that we assigned the player prefab to, that has methods for doing these things, starting a host, a server, or a client. So for each method, we can say network manager.singleton to get reference to it, and then we can call start host. And then if we copy paste this to the other methods and make sure to change it to start server and to start client, we now have this. This is not everything, because once we connect, we also want to change scene to the gameplay scene. So at the top, we'll add a field. We'll add a serialized field, private string. This is just so we can have the scene name changeable in the editor. We don't want to have to come back in here if we change the gameplay scene name to something else. So we'll put gameplay scene name, and we'll just call it gameplay at the moment. So changing scene in a multiplayer game is slightly different from a single player game, because the server is the one who decides which scene to go to, and when clients connect, they need to know which scene everybody's in if they join late. And if you're already connected and the server changes scene, you also need to know that that's happened and change with it. So to do that, we use the network manager.singleton.scene manager. So there's a scene manager in the network manager, and that has its own load scene method. And we pass in the scene we want to go to, so the gameplay scene name. And then the load mode, we're just going to do single loading. We're not doing any additive scene loading here. So load scene mode.single. And to make these calls, by the way, and to reference this, I've imported at the top using unity.netcode and using unityengine.scenemanagement. So in this method, starting a host is just the same as starting a server and then starting a client and connecting to your own server. So this is still a server and it can change the scene. And in the case down here in the second method, where we're starting just a standalone server, we also need to change the scene for everyone who connects. But if we're a client, we're just connecting and it will handle changing the scene for us because the server will already have done it. And then that's all there is for the code, so we can head back to Unity, and we just need to make sure to hook up all of our buttons or nothing will work. So let it compile, then we'll head over to our UI. I'll go into the main menu prefab, select the host button, go down to the onClick event and add a callback, drag in the game object that has our main menu display script on it, and then we can select the main menu display.start host for the first one. And then on the server, we'll drag it in again and call start server, and then on client, add, drag in, main menu display.start client. And now we can head back into the scene, make sure it's correct on our prefabs. See, I messed with my prefab slightly, so it's not actually updated in the scene. So I'll have to go to my prefab, select overrides, and put revert all. And that way it will now match the prefab, so they all have their callbacks on now. And with that done, we can now do a build and test it. Just make sure if you go to your build settings that you have your main menu scene first, and then you have a gameplay scene in there too. So we got both scenes. I'm on Windows, I'm going to do a build and a run. Okay, so I've done the build, I've run it twice, so we now have the editor, and then we also have 2 standalone builds. And all we need to do here is select either host or server in the editor, so let's select server. Nothing is spawned in because we only spawn in prefabs for players, and currently it's acting just as a server, not as a host as well. And then over here we can select client, and it spawns in a player for us, and we can select client here. And it's also spawned in one for us too, but we spawned it in at the exact same place. But because we added a network transform component earlier, if we move a player in the server, which is the editor, it will be reflected in the clients too. So we can go to our player prefabs, you see them both here. We'll select one of them and move it to the left. You see it updating, and we can select the other one and move it to the right, and we see it here. And we selected to sync the position, so we can move in all axes. And we also selected to sync the rotation, so I can rotate, and that is also reflected. But we didn't select scale, so if I try and change the scale, it only happens in the server. We don't see it happening on the clients, which is to be expected. And there we have it. Those are the basics. We now have a project set up in the latest version of Unity with the latest version of netcode for game objects. And from here, like I said, any future project and tutorial that we work on, we'll just be starting with this project and making any adjustments that we need. I'll probably create a new repository that just starts with this as a template. That's the purpose of this. So the next thing I plan on doing is making a fully fledged character select system. So we can go into a lobby, see the other players who are in there, have some characters to pick from, and when you select them, you'll see a kind of animation of them walking towards the camera and doing a pose or an animation of some kind. So I hope that idea sounds interesting, and let me know down below what you think about that, if there's any specific features about it you want to see. If you've enjoyed the video and found it useful, then please leave a like and subscribe. That's all for now, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. But of course, before I go, I've got to thank my patrons. A special thanks to Gregory Pierce, Mark McCorkle, Sahila, Dario Alvarez, Francisco, and David McDermott. If anyone else wants to help support the channel monetarily, there's a link to the Patreon down below, and if not, there's also links down below to other social media such as Twitch, Twitter, and Discord, so if you could help us out by following on any of those or checking any of those out, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.